For thousands of years, elders and knowledge keepers have used stories to educate future generations. Stories and words can help heal our hearts and make Mother Earth a better place for all people. This is Healing Hearts.
Hello everyone, good evening. Welcome to Healing Hearts. I'm Tracy Koga. On our last episode, we talked about the resources and what organizations are out there to help our Indigenous and newcomer communities find work. Tonight, we're going to look and see what jobs are out there and what the future for employment looks like. This is Healing Hearts.
So the Hive is a climbing and fitness facility, so we're bouldering only, which means no ropes or harnesses. We use mats for protection. The four pillars of our business are climbing, education, health and wellness, and community, and those aspects all kind of come together to create like a 5-star climbing experience.
Welcome back to Healing Hearts, and a big thank you to our sponsor, The Hive. And I am very, very happy to say that we have two very special guests from The Hive on our show tonight. We've got Andrew Coffey, who is the king bee, or the owner of The Hive, and Corey Cuthbert, good old Winnipeg being represented here. Corey is a managing partner of The Hive right here in Winnipeg. And I also have Molly Dunbar. And Molly, you represent the, let me see now, I have to read this, the West Central Women's Resource Center, but you know, we're gonna know that name by heart once this show is over. And I think who's just dropped in, we have Jack here, Jack McFadee. Welcome back, Jack. You just came in the nick of time.
Thank you.
Yes. And so Jack, how would we kind of say your background? Obviously in government, you worked in the Ombudsman's office for a very long time, working with Indigenous clients, and
yes.
Yeah. So you're going to bring your perspective on the labor force, the jobs, employment.
Actually, I was with Natural Resources for 16 years, and then I went to the Ombudsman for 26.
Oh wow.
Like
Okay, yeah. So you're going to bring a lot of history, and maybe predict where we're going to be in the future. So tonight, it's all about employment, and it's a big topic, I know, for Indigenous and newcomer communities, and it has been for a long time. So I'm going to actually start with you, Jack. Then, so you know, give us a little bit of history on what you've seen through the many years that you've been involved in government. Have we come along? Are we, you know, looking good, or is it pretty much the same?
That's a good question. When I worked for Natural Resources, there was four Indigenous people that identified as four Indigenous people back in 1976-77. When I moved over to the Ombudsman's office, there was one Indigenous person, and that was myself. And there was initially there was, I don't know, 12 employees, maybe 12, 14. And then it expanded a little more. And really, I was still basically the only Indigenous employee there. There may have been a couple that came in briefly and then they left. But that's pretty well it, you know. I think the way I went into government was through a program called New Careers. And what they did was they provided us with 2 years training in certain areas. With myself, it was geographical names. I had an interest in geography. Mm-hmm. I took part-time university. And what they were doing at that time was they wanted to record all Indigenous names in Manitoba that were unrecorded. So we did field trips out into the country. We talked to hundreds of people to obtain information on local landmarks and what the origins of those names were. And after 2 years, if you were successful, you became a permanent employee, and that's what happened. And throughout the course of the 16 years, we continued to identify geographical features, named features after World War I casualties, World War II casualties, and so on. But due to changing government back in 92, I believe it was, I lost my job for 6 weeks. I was one of those, I don't know what you would call it, expendable people, I guess. And to be honest with you, I think there was a high number of Indigenous people that were let go, basically. And it was trimming the government, but they seemed to select Indigenous people more so than others. That's the impression that I got. But I managed to get on with the Ombudsman's office, and that's where I was for 22 years. I know that where my brother worked was with the federal government. They were Indigenous employees, quite a lot of them. But I've also been involved with certain training programs, and not as a trainee, but to speak to youth who are going through, I think it's called Youth Build. What they would do is they'd get young men that were in trouble with law coming out of jail, kids in the street, kids up north that couldn't find employment, and they would train them to be carpenters. And Clayton and I would go there and we would talk to these youth for an hour once a week to tell them about our experiences in the workforce. I found that quite, for myself, satisfactory. You know, I got some satisfaction on it because I was encouraging these guys. You've got an opportunity to do what happened to me 40 years ago, and don't waste it. Do not be afraid to ask questions if you don't know anything, if you don't know how to do something. That's what the instructors are there for. They want you to succeed. And I also encourage some of the more advanced students to help the ones that were struggling. You know, it becomes almost like a little community in itself. Mm-hmm. I know that at this present time, I think it's very difficult to get employment, or else nobody wants to work. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but you can see for yourself that people are crying for employees, but they don't seem to want to work. I don't know what the issue is, but to be honest with you, I want to go back. But it's not that I'm bored. It's just something to do. I mean, doing circles for reconciliation is it's a challenge, but it's also a place where I can meet new people. And it's teaching me how to communicate better, more effectively with others. And I think a lot of Indigenous youth, I'm not sure, but for myself, I was quite shy when I first moved down to the city, when I first started working, when I entered the workforce. You don't want to make mistakes, right? You don't want to look stupid. And that was a thing that always kept it coming into my mind, But with the help of the individual the manager that I had, and eventually the people in the workforce where I worked, they accepted me as who I was. I may have been quiet, that was fine with them, But I think the thing that really gets especially men and women, mm-hmm. If you get into sports, in an office setting or something like that, it really, it seems like you become more acceptable because you have a common interest. And that's what I find. And I think those are the types of things that should be probably included in the workforce or in the companies that hire these people, But that's not for me to say. That's all I got for now.
Well, that is so important. And it was interesting because I picked up on that situation, and you'd mentioned Clayton. Clayton is our knowledge keeper on the show, and he does have a special relationship with Andrew and Corey. So I'm going to go to you two now. Jack talked about getting these youth and getting them excited about carpentry, and and I think it's that whole kind of thing of community and being included and giving giving confidence, right? So, Andrew, I guess maybe share your story that your involvement with Clayton.
Yeah, so I guess I met Clayton through a very close person to me, my dad, who worked a long time with Clayton, many years when we lived in Winnipeg. But when Corey and I got together to build a indoor climbing gym in Winnipeg, we set a goal for ourselves of trying to hire as many Indigenous and newcomer individuals as we could, because one, we knew that the community there has a very strong contingent of Indigenous people and newcomers, and also we've traditionally not seen those communities in climbing, and there's probably a variety of reasons for that, but just not seeing individuals in those communities climbing was something that we felt we need to change, because climbing for us means building community, creating friendships, challenging yourself, building confidence, getting skills that can translate into other areas of life. And it's good for your health. It's a good, healthy sort of fitness activity, but it's also really great socially. So combining all of those things and trying to integrate and create a more inclusive climbing gym was one of our big goals from the beginning. And so Clayton helped us get the ball rolling, basically. And we did a training with Clayton on our very first day. Well, actually, even before that, we did a hiring fair. We can talk about that if you like. But yeah, we did a hiring fair. We did some training, as well as with Hanny, who you also probably know. And yeah, we've continued on both in trying to get newcomers and Indigenous folk in to climb on their own, as well as employment. So we're hoping to do kind of both of those things at the same time. And we've been fairly successful, I would say. We haven't hit our goals yet, but we're still working towards them. But we had a really great start. I think COVID was really hard on us too.
Yeah,
So.
I was going to say there was a little thing called COVID and the pandemic that has kind of like interrupted all of our lives and really shaken us to the core, so to speak, yeah. Corey. So I'm going to, Andrew, so I'm going to go to Corey now. What was the feelings and what was your takeaway, Corey, on this whole kind of, I'm not going to say a new way, but definitely a different way of hiring and opening eyes?
Yeah, like with the way that we hired, like I had it explained as a more radical way of hiring, I guess, in a sense. It was very eye-opening. It was, the number of people that we hired through our initial hiring fair that were from Indigenous and newcomer communities. They were probably about 20% to 30% of our staff at the time. And when we were initially hiring, a lot of people would think that we'd want to hire climbers for a climbing gym, but ultimately what we were looking for was customer service skills, or the belief that they have the opportunity to develop those skills as well too. So we knew that since we've seen less climbers or less Indigenous newcomer demographics in climbing itself, and that's something that we, in building a community, ideally would be representative of the local population, that's something that we wanted to change. And by hiring from those demographics more targeted and more specifically is one of the easiest things we can do. Obviously not the only thing we can do, and we're acknowledging that as well. But it's been very heartwarming, a lot of the hires that we've had from those, that initial hiring events, but we've also worked with a few different groups as well to do some mentorship, like the Momentum Center, McDonald Youth Services. We've had a hire come from there as well, Infinity Woman through Manitoba Métis Federation as well too. But as Andrew mentioned, we've had some challenges with the pandemic as well too, but it's also learning about different people's upbringings and families and the challenges that they've had. And it's been very, heartwarming. We had one fellow who had some experience. He grew up in over 100 foster care homes and never really belonged anywhere, I guess, in a sense that way, and spent a lot of time in and out of jail. And when he was working with us, we came to a staff party, and he's sent me a personal message afterwards thanking us, and saying like, he never experienced that before in his life. And, it was nice just to eat food with an employer and have those very like positive experiences that way, which he, hadn't had many that way. So it was, very eye-opening having those experiences and being able to share those with our team as well. And seeing that community grow with all sides of that community. So.
Oh, that's amazing. And I think sometimes those instances are worth way more than money or wealth or success. To make that much of a difference in someone's life is incredible. So we're going to explore this more, definitely. Molly, now I'm going to go to you, and let's maybe put more emphasis on the women, Indigenous women, newcomer women, jobs out there, the stigma, right? There is stigma there, especially for females, on looking for employment and what kind of jobs, that they should look for. And I hate to say it, we're in 2022, but, all of that still exists. So, and you're right in the heart and the core of downtown too. So you see it all.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to also begin by saying, like, what everyone was just sharing, I was picking things out of it that I have recognized, as a service provider, as someone working in nonprofit sector, providing support to women who are looking for employment. What you recognize, like where success happens and where it's long-term success, is kind of exactly what everyone has been talking about already. I was kind of even making notes because with what Jack was saying about having supports in the office, and it's about relationships, being accepted for who you are, meeting people where they're at. I think that that's something that's been lost in a lot of expectations employers have of job seekers, is that they have to meet this huge list of qualifications. And and that throws a lot of people off, even if maybe they don't expect all of that. Just because it's listed, a lot of people count themselves out, because the confidence and all that is very different. And especially for women, women commonly have, I know we've talked about it, like an imposter syndrome. You're in a role and you're like, I don't know if I'm qualified for this. But you do it. And there's other people that are probably not qualified either, but they're believing in themselves. So, why can't you? But anyways, also, what was being shared about the hiring events, that Corey and Andrew, right, was speaking about. I thought that was so interesting that, first it's about getting people there climbing, like build that passion, that interest. And then, okay, now, like, are you interested in this? Do you want to work with us? Do you want to get other people interested? I think that's just such a cool model to follow. And it's something that, as someone trying to help people find employment, is so refreshing to hear that that some people are trying to do this and really provide that mentorship and provide that opportunity for training, because that's just, like, I think we've moved more and more into, you got to work for free and volunteer to get the experience and the training and all the skills you need so that you will qualify for this job to be paid, right? When, like, no, hire me, pay me, train me, and I'll improve, like, support me, and I will get better, and I will do great things for you. I promise. Like, just see that potential in me. And I think that that's just it, is like, there's so much potential in all of the folks that I support and work with, and opportunity is there. Yeah. Okay. Jobs are there, but is the opportunity there? Not always. Right. And that's kind of the frustrating thing, is like, okay, yes, there's lots of people who want to work, who need to work, who need that income to support themselves and their families. But, and then the jobs are there and they're saying there's nobody for us to hire, but, like, where's that disconnect, And, in terms of women, I know, like, we have, what I see a lot of women interested to work, in the care sector, childcare, healthcare, long-term care, all that. And these are, like, precarious, like low paid, work, and you got to wonder where that value, like how that gets valued. Is it low paid because women are doing the work, or is it, like that kind of chicken and egg thing? But a lot of the time that's what women see, that's what they're passionate about. They are caring people. This is something they've done their whole lives. They've done it in an unpaid way, raising kids, taking care of their families and parents, and so they see that as skills they have, and sometimes just
Do you
are
think,
happy to do that, right? But
do you think, Molly, sorry, and I'm just sorry for
yeah,
interrupting. Do you think
no worries.
that we just think that it's safe because it's innate in us, and I can do that, because we're so afraid to step out of the box or say, hey, I want to manage like a climbing facility. I don't have a clue, but I want to do it.
I think it's safe, and I think it's also like where, like, realistically sometimes where the opportunity actually exists, it's where people are given that opportunity, and so where in kind of the pathway can we intervene to have people dream differently and think of these different things? And maybe they don't want to. I mean, but there have been a lot of people, because we have a training program at the center where it's taking root child minding training, and it's not a sort of certificate or anything, but we will train women, and it's largely been newcomers in the past, but it is open to all women, to prepare for work in the childcare sector. So just to get that kind of childcare assistant type role. And a lot of them, their parents, so they're like, I know how to care for children. And then they go through the training, they go to, maybe they get hired or they start doing the work, and they're like, oh, wait a minute, this is different. This is different than parenting.
Yeah,
like
I know.
Working in a daycare or a childcare center is different.
Yeah.
And then they start to think, okay, what else? And that's okay too. I think that's just, it is. I mean, I'm a person that did all sorts of different positions at different organizations to kind of figure out, okay, well, I like this about that, I don't like that. And that's how we all figure out our careers. And that but for a lot of folks, maybe they haven't had any experience, and you got to start somewhere. And in the case for some of the women that I serve, they're all at all different stages of their lives, and kind of starting where they are, and I just kind of try to work with them to help them figure out where they want to go.
And that is hard. Jack, so now you've listened to the round table here. I'm kind of wondering, how do we chisel away and break outside the box and present different opportunities to Indigenous peoples, to newcomers? So, it's not just carpentry, or it's not just childcare, or, the usual jobs. What can we offer them to get them excited, to create that excitement of really feeling, first of all, worthy, gaining respect, confidence, and pride, and at the same time creating a livelihood to support either themselves or a family?
Oh, that's a tough question. In both the jobs that I had, I received 2 years training, and I was very well left on my own. The second one, it was two-year contract, two one-year contracts. I was doing some investigations, but I had to basically learn on my own, and they gave me that opportunity. But the staff there helped me out, and they helped me out a lot. And when I became an intake officer, totally different job. I mean, these are the first calls that come in, and the guy said to me, you learn by the seat of your pants. And that's what I had to do. And again, the staff were very good. Nobody really wanted that job because it was a tough job, but I stuck with it for 26 years. And I think there was a lot of stress. And I think that's what discourages a lot of people. But I stuck it out. I really had no place else that I really wanted that I had to go. So I said, okay, this is probably I'm gonna stay for the rest of my career. So I'm gonna make the best of it. And I stuck it out. And I think what we have to do, even as adults, individuals that have retired, Indigenous people, newcomers that have retired, they should, we should become mentors, speak to these youth and tell them this is what we went through. It's not easy. Anything that's not, it's not easy, but you get rewarded when you complete a task, and that reward is self-satisfaction. I think I did a good job. Somebody pat you on the back, you did a good job. That's a good feeling, and you can do the job. And like Molly said, a lot of people are probably would become very qualified if they were given the opportunity to take on those jobs. Like some of these position descriptions, like they're like this, right? Who's got all that? You can break it down to this and then work your way up. Maybe some of those descriptions don't even apply to the job. Maybe they're trying to target specific individuals to come in. Again, it's almost like a barrier for Indigenous people and newcomers. It almost seems like it's targeted that way, or targeted for my friend here needs a job. I'm going to make sure that he or she gets it because these are that person's qualifications. I don't know. It could be any number of those things, but I think we as the seniors, I guess you call them the elders, we're the ones that I think should be responsible for ensuring that the youth that are coming up today listen to our stories, and that we have a venue where we can talk to them and say, look, it's hard, but nothing is easy anyway. And the thing is, you make it hard on yourself. I think if you hear people who have gone through it, who've had nothing, who didn't have the education, or didn't have complete education, and go on to be successful. I think that's maybe one of the keys that keeps coming into my mind when I'm thinking, walking, kind of stuff. Like but then how do you get to these youth and these newcomer youth and Indigenous youth and getting to talk to them? There has to be somewhere where you can actually meet with them and speak to them. And there are a lot of Indigenous men and women that have worked in government and private industries that have retired. You know what? Share that experience. You want to build up your Indigenous community? That's how you do it.
Yeah.
Be an elder,
No, that is, wow, so true. So Corey and Andrew, I mean, even going through your experience and in light of now everything that has happened to the Indigenous communities with residential schools and way beyond that, and I'm kind of curious too on your other staff. How has the dynamic worked with the other staff too as well? Andrew.
Yeah, I can start. Well, first of all, coming as like a white settler, cisgendered male, able-bodied person, I have all the privilege that I could ever have asked for, and it's a journey for me to kind of learn what that means and what that means for the way people see me and what that means for the way that I act and my duties and responsibilities to be a responsible person and a contributing member of society, when so many things that I have taken for granted for so many years. And the past few years have really, I mean, I grew up within a family that was very well aware of Indigenous issues, and my dad was a champion for Indigenous benefits and welfare, like all the best things you could possibly do for Indigenous people. But I'm still learning, right? And it's a journey for us. And as an organization, we're learning too. And so when we started, we felt it was really important on day one of hiring, or day one of training, to have Clayton and Hanny come in, and they spent the whole afternoon talking with our staff about what does it mean to bring Indigenous people and newcomers onto our team. What are the things we need to be aware of? What are the ways in which we need to be inclusive, and is there racism or any sort of things that happen underneath the level of awareness that we might not realize if we we're lucky as a business because most of the people we hire are pretty young, and they've all been brought up with an awareness of these issues and are very welcoming and inclusive. But a couple of things that we made sure we had was we made sure we had food that was appropriate for our newcomers when we had our lunch. Clayton, who is an incredible speaker, told his story, and we watched some videos, and that really gave us a sense of, what does the Indigenous experience look like going into the workforce? We don't all start with the same opportunities. We don't all start at the same level. And so how do we help people get that first step up? And then how do we support them when they're in that organization, by being aware of the different cultures, maybe some of the different tendencies that people have based on where they've come from and how they've been treated in the past. And that we spent the whole afternoon of our first day on that. And, that we weren't surprised to see our staff, non-Indigenous, non-newcomers, really welcome that because we knew that they would. But it really set a great tone for us as an organization to say, these people are part of our community and they are equally valued. They might not have the climbing experience that others do, but they bring so much else, so much more stuff that we can learn from, and it makes our community richer. So that's sort of where we started, and it's been really great.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Corey, I guess too, if you want to take it a step further, even making it more local here, but maybe you can even share a story too.
Yeah, for sure. So, kind of as Andrew mentioned, just the fact that we know that both Andrew and myself have a lot of privilege in the positions we're in, but as Clayton and Sandy also mentioned that maybe it's worthwhile to have him help and sit in on some interviews with me, mentioning that, some Indigenous and newcomer folks maybe aren't trained to interview as well as, our kind of societal standards are in a sense that way. So I was fortunate enough that he was willing to help mentor me in that sense as well too, and helped interview a number of Indigenous folks as well. And it was very interesting to me because at first I didn't think too much about it, but one of the more surprising points that stood out is especially because many of the Indigenous and newcomer communities tend to have less opportunities because of just more barriers in their life that's preventing them from getting work experience or getting just leisure time to go explore things, get an education, because they often end up having to be helpful at home. And we noticed a lot of times that as you get to know people from both of these demographics after hiring or through an interview, that they might not be able to speak to their skills of their hard work and their determination in many of those aspects. But what we learn when we end up hiring them and then working with them is that their work ethic is pretty hard to beat. And it's amazing when you realize that it's like, okay, they're coming here to work for us and they are one of the best at going and doing cleaning tasks. And then they go home and they have to support their parents with their, we have a few that have 4 or 5 siblings at home that are all needing assistance as well. And they end up being, a taxi driver and things like that. And we have, one of our staff, we noticed he was biking to work all the time. And all of a sudden, he was starting to take taxis to work. And, it's not like we have super long shifts that people work. We're evening, weekend work for the most part. And he was taking taxis to work and taxis home. And we just thought like this, what happened? Like, why isn't he biking anymore? But we realized that, through talking to him that his bike was stolen, and he lived in a rougher part of Winnipeg in the kind of inner core, and his bike was stolen. So we were trying to figure out a way to get him a bike, and one of our employees, their sister-in-law, wasn't using that bike, so they said, okay, well, I know someone who can use that bike. And the same day that we brought the bike to work for him, he showed up on another bike, and we were like, well, we told you we're getting you a bike. So he shows up to work on the bike, and he ended up buying a bike and got lost on the way to work, and ended up on the perimeter highway biking to work, and he was dripping with sweat and an hour late for work. He's panicked, and he's just wanting to put his bike away, and he doesn't have a bike lock, and so it won't get stolen here, it's fine. It's like, he just had a bike that's stolen, bring it inside. Like, and then the next week he takes a taxi to work, and we're like, we just got you a bike and you bought a bike, why are you taking a taxi to work? He's like, well, both my brothers wanted to go for a bike ride because they didn't have bikes, so I went to go to work and the bikes were gone.
Oh my goodness. Oh, well, okay, I guess moral is you can never have too many bikes. And don't get lost on the perimeter, although it is very easy to get lost in that area. Well, no doubt. Anyways, well, I'm hopefully there's a happy ending, and he got the bikes and he's great. But Molly too, for women and the situation there, again, it's the same thing. Like, it's not like they work during the day, but when they go home, they are still continuing to work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say I loved all those stories, all those anecdotes are so special, and even just that, like, showing up an hour late for work, but being willing to hear the story and then and try to support them through that, is so great. It's something, I think, also to echo what both Andrew and Corey were sharing, like recognizing my own privilege and my own experience does not reflect exactly what a lot of the folks I'm supporting are dealing with. Just how much, of the work at home, the unpaid labor, but even the emotional labor, and it goes beyond even their own homes into their communities. And folks are often, if they're caregivers at home, they're caregivers beyond as well, into all of their community, right? And actually, one way that I really see that at the Women's Center is that there's a lot of folks who have lived experience who work at the center, and so as a staff team, we're always learning ourselves, learning from folks in that way, and that whole idea that even Andrew and Corey were sharing about, like, the orientation and that first day, and getting people on the same page in that, that's something that we're constantly doing as a staff team. Is it's not something that you build once and it's done. You kind of have to keep these conversations going. You have to be committed to this ongoing work, and learning about all the different ways that, like, workplaces are structured, like, are very colonial and very, like, patriarchal and all these things. And so if we don't want it to always, like, be replicated in that way, you have to actually actively, like, work, through that every single day, and kind of question everything. And it can be messy, and you're going to make lots of mistakes. Like, any workplace that tries this, I think, is going to make lots of mistakes. But it just requires a lot of time. Like, I know relationships are so important, communication and trust, and vulnerability, right? Just to be open with one another and do that work. But one of the ways that we've, I think, had a lot of success at West Central Women's Resource Center is actually one of our, like, flagship programs, which is Empowering Women into Leadership. And this is a training program, and it's one that we run a couple times a year. And so women will go through this training, and that's kind of where it can end, but it also can extend into a mentorship opportunity where there'll be up to 3 6-month placements, very casual, about 10 hours a week, working with us at the center in some capacity, and usually providing some program support. You know, someone maybe helping in the food security program, in the housing program, in the drop-in, and honestly, that's where a lot of folks that are now like full-time staff at the center, that's how they got their start in the center, was going through this training, getting, you know, maybe they started by accessing some other services, heard about this program, We Will, came to the training, and it just kind of went from there. Like there's probably upwards of 10 staff that are full-time now at the center, and that was their path. And so I think that's been really interesting and special to see. And I know that, I mean, it's hard because I think in community work, sometimes we have that ability to put in that extra time and mentorship and all that, because you are kind of a mission-based workplace anyways. So if you can accomplish some of the things you're trying to do, even in the way you do your own hiring and all that, then it is just a very natural fit. And sometimes I think it's harder for other workplaces, or maybe they don't always see or have the time to see the value in all of that, what you can put into it. But then I hear, you know, the Hive sharing their story right now, and I see it's very possible. So like, maybe I shouldn't be so easy on all these other workplaces. Maybe we need to hold people much more accountable, you know. I always kind of, when I'm trying to describe, like, you know, the world that we want to build, it's like, right now we're in a world where people are meant to be built for jobs or the economy, right? But we need our economy and our jobs to be built for people, because that's who's in them, right? As human beings that have lives and have responsibilities, and it's messy, and it needs to support that. And I mean, COVID has been a perfect example of how a lot of workplaces needed to become a lot more understanding pretty quickly, or else they were going to just lose people, because kids are out of school and all these things, people are getting sick and you can't go, and I hope that we don't lose the lessons from that, honestly, because I think there's a lot of important lessons that came out of COVID, and the realization that, like, we can support people, and we can financially support people, and we can, you know, and it's not a bad thing, and it doesn't mean people won't want to work. It just means people will be more secure and able, you know, and that's, I think, part of that thing about how can people dream, like, well, they need to be financially stable to even then begin to look past, like, for a lot of folks, a job is that survival, you know, and if you want it to be more than that, then we need to figure out how can people meet their basic needs, and then they'll have that time to really think about what they want, what's their potential, you know, where can they really add value in the way that they would enjoy. And so, you know, I mean, that's a huge conversation, I know, but I think it's one that we should always be having, you know. It's important, and it's I don't know. I wish it was a conversation that was happening more, for sure.
Well, we are having it right now, Molly.
Yes, we're having it right now.
and you know, I guess, and the next topic for me would be mental health. You know, that, and Molly, that's, you know, a great segue from everything that you said, as happiness, but it's mental health. Jack, how have you seen mental health affect Indigenous peoples throughout, you know, your career in government to where they are now? And I guess if we want to say a good thing, more people are speaking out, right? And seeking help.
Yes. I think something like that should be available in the workplaces anyway. You know, they should probably have a staff member that can actually be a person that you can go to, not HR, because, you know, they've got enough on you, but a specific person, even if it's a part of that person's other job in that unit, you know, that he's the go-to guy for mental health. Now he's going to be carrying the burden of everything that you probably dump on him, but you know what? If a person is trained for that, they should be able to handle it. My job was, as intake, was very difficult. It was, I was listening to everybody's problems, all kinds of problems. And some of them were screamers, some of them swore and things like that, right? But I had nobody to go to. So I kind of sort of kept all of this in for the first couple of years that I did it. One day I just decided, I can't, I'm ignoring my family. So I decided I'm going to try this. I'm going to let the phone ring and then just spiritually slip out of my body and watch this guy answer the phone, answer the questions. Once after I'm back in again and just do the notes, right? It kind of worked. Like I think I kind of tricked myself into it. And then I walked home I walked to work and then I walked home. I walked about 9 kilometers a day after work, before and after work, just to get myself ready for the stress, and for myself, that's how I handled my mental health. It might not work for everybody else, but I think when, it's hard to speak for other people because you don't know what they've gone through, what they're going through. And I think that's why this is such a hard topic to make any comments on, unless you actually meet someone that's gone through that. I know that there were people that I worked with that were struggling with their work, with things at home, but we were there to take the time to listen to each other. Not during work hours, maybe lunch hour or coffee break, right? Where you can vent. And that was one way of doing it. But I think education is important. We have to recognize when our mental health starts to deteriorate because I don't think we know. Somebody says you're cranky. Me? Cranky? What are you talking about? You don't notice. You do things without, and I think, like I say, it becomes a habit. And it becomes intrusive in another person's life. And they tell you, and you look at it like this, well, maybe there is something wrong. How do I deal with it? And I think that's where you, like you say, you have to go and speak to someone. I really don't have the answers for that, but I think education is probably important to be able to deal with those issues. And I think it's also important for even these young youth that are coming to realize that education is an important part of getting a job. It's all intertwined. The job, the mental health, having no job is also an issue that could weigh heavily on you. I remember when I was living up north, there were no jobs. What do? You start doubting yourself. Am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Until somebody gives you a chance, those things will stay with you. I guess it's like wall climbing, right? You look at this wall with all these handholds and toe holds, right? You got to start from the bottom. And maybe the first few times you go 2 feet, it's a little too high, maybe, I don't know. But to pick your, what do you call it? It's not really a trail, but I'll call it a trail because you have to follow certain things to get to the top in the easiest way, right? So you think it out. And I think that's the same thing with your job search, your mental health, your life at home. It's like climbing a wall. Slowly going through the process of this is the easiest, this may be easier, this may be a shortcut, which is better, the shortcut or the easier way? The easier way, of course, right? So I think that's how you have to envision your career, your life plan, using that wall as an example. And you build up muscle on the way too, so.
See, this was karma. I mean, the Hive guys here. You had it all figured out. Okay. Job fair tomorrow. Corey and Andrew, though, the Hive, when we actually did the little promotional piece and whatever, though, you talked about community. And spilling off what Jack has just said, is to create that community is so important, regardless if you're an expert climber. And Jack's analogy is amazing, to look at that wall now. I will never look at a climbing wall again as a climbing wall, but as a path to whatever. But yeah, I mean, that's really what you built your core for the Hive, which is so cool.
Yeah, Jack, that's an amazing metaphor. I must say that's brilliant. And we often think that, you know, climbing it's a metaphor in so many different ways. Like, you know, the challenge of life is something that you never know how you're going to get through it. And you kind of put one foot in front of the other, and you look around and you identify what supports you have, and you try to make your way through. And you know, that's the way you climb. That's the way we get through life. But for us, you know, what's really valuable is doing it together. And that for us as a climbing gym, like in contrast to sort of a standard fitness facility where people go in, they put their headphones on, they get on their machine, they don't talk to anybody. Climbing is a social event. You don't ever really climb on your own. A couple of crazy people climb on their own, but you know, most people don't climb on their own. And what you learn from climbing with other people is you get to see people who are more advanced than you. You get to see people who can mentor you in a very like hands-on, tactile, instantaneous way. And so you can have some of the best climbers around climbing with brand new people. It's like going to the hockey rink and Wayne Gretzky's, you know, skating around, and you can kind of play together. So that's one of the best things about what we do and what climbing gyms offer, is that you come together around something that you love, whether you're a novice or an expert, and the challenge is always there. You never stop learning, you never stop growing, and doing that with people who are like-minded and yet very diverse, because everybody's a climber. This is our philosophy is that, you know, everybody starts climbing at some point in their youth. Usually, you know, as soon as they start crawling, the next thing is climbing onto the sofa or climbing up to try and steal like cookies out of the cookie jar and getting on the table, or climbing a tree. And we all do that. And so we all have this in common, this sort of innate part of our nature. When we get together and celebrate that, we can create some really powerful, lasting friendships, relationships, and instill some real like self-efficacy, the feeling that we can actually accomplish challenging things. And that's one of the things I love the most about climbing, I would say.
Corey, what do you think the future is? Not just for climbing, but the future generation. What will that look like?
The future generation of like our workforce, or
workforce.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Hard to say exactly, I guess, but I do, you know, think that more probably broader, like the future of our community. I'm really excited to see that grow, especially, you know, I've been involved in climbing in Winnipeg for, you know, many years now, like 10 years or so, from a career standpoint, about 7 or so. I've, you know, seen it grow is one of the most amazing things. It's, you know, I, you know, wanted to build more climbing in Winnipeg because at many points in my climbing career, just as a participant, there's been points where you see, you know, you go to the Hive in Vancouver and you see a 10-year-old kid climbing something that you struggling on, and you're like, man, I wish I started when I was that age. And kind of just, you know, building that space for community to grow, because, you know, something that you wish you had at a younger age, so or at a different part of your life. And I think that's kind of really the big thing that I want to see that future, is that, you know, as myself with those younger kids, that maybe there's, you know, an Indigenous or newcomer coming into the community that never tried it before. And, you know, we had one of our staff at our hiring events that tried climbing for the first time, and he said, you know, I always thought of climbing as, you know, always knew it was a thing, it was something you saw in movies and on TV and stuff like that, but I'm doing this right now. And he never thought of himself doing that. And he, you know, was very, very happy for that experience. And I think that's kind of the big thing, is that, I'd love to see this community grow, and especially because so much of our activity is, we have indoor climbing at the Hive, and a lot of people take it outdoors, and there's lots of beautiful outdoor spaces, and it's a lot of traditional Indigenous land as well too, and would love to see that space shared and a very welcoming community that way among everybody. So.
Wow. So now we've got our summers cut out for us, or climbing out for us. No. And Molly, what would be your wish for the West Central Women's Resource Center for the future?
Yeah, you're asking lots of big questions tonight, and I've so far I feel like I've avoided most of them, but now I'm just
no.
Yeah. Well, honestly, the employment supports that we offer at this point is sort of me. All the staff, I think, will refer people best they can to places they know as people come in and ask questions. Everyone does that. But I think that there is opportunity for growth in that, because a big part of the work we do is about empowerment and building capacity, and I'd love to see, at least within our center, that grow a bit more. And part of the reason for that, I'll say there's tons of really innovative and thoughtful programming that exists in Winnipeg, in Manitoba, to support folks, and I know a small fraction of it, and it's my job to know about these things, to help people and refer people, and I can spend all day looking, and I can still not have a sense of just all of the things that exist, because there is so much. And I think that's one of the things that makes it so difficult for folks, is it's hard to know where to begin. And even if you've got an idea, like the climbing metaphor, looking around for those supports, sometimes maybe it's not visible to you, but it's visible to the person that's standing and spotting you from the ground, right? And not everyone has that spotter. Not everyone has that network. And especially, I think, especially newcomer folks, if they're here on their own and they haven't really met people yet. But also, like everyone, people are sometimes isolated and disconnected in different ways, even if you were born and raised here. But that being said, how to build networks, and that we put so much pressure on people to do that themselves, and to know how to do that. And that's the advice, you go to a career counselor and well, networking will help you find a job. All right, what is that? How do I, where do I meet these people that you're talking about? Where is this network? And then when I'm, trying to give advice about that, I'm it's not a simple straight line. Follow these steps and you're going to have this great network. There's so much about where you're at. And so I just encourage people, to try to find ways to get involved in things they care about, things that they're interested in, and meet people there. And then don't be afraid to ask people for help, for advice, for just to have a conversation, ask them questions about themselves. I think there's always a lot of mixed messages for folks, and especially people when they're new, is kind of all right, you don't ask people about their personal life. That's not, that's not appropriate. That's not professional. But at the same time, you should, because you want to network and you want to build friendships and relationships. It's all very confusing. And so, yeah, people are rightfully a bit hesitant and unsure how to move forward. And that is where it's all of our responsibility. We need to all be part of that, and not put so much of that responsibility on that one person to figure this out for themselves and just try, right? We need, these things are not that straightforward as we talk about them. And so I think just ways of finding ways to build the community, those connections, and have that build out into the employment and wider kind of world of work. How does that look? How can we all be a part of that? How can we have more of these conversations and help people to? It's about work, people want to work, but really it's just about to help people build that community and build those connections. And just a comment on the kind of mental health piece is it's kind of saying there's so much of that focus on like that idea of self-care, but really it should be about collective care, right? Like that self-care, sure, okay, you can try to go and get a massage with your benefits if you have them, but that might not change anything if what you're missing is connection and relationship and all these things, right? Like and so there's just lots of those ways that we need to challenge some of these ideas that this is what you got to do and then all your problems will be solved. It's not always that straightforward, and often people just need a little help. And so that's the way I like to work with folks is and actually it's what runs through a lot of the programming at West Central Women's Resource Center is meeting people where they're at. It's women centered or person centered. What do you need? And we don't require you to be at any place in your job search or any place in your whatever needs to receive support. Come in, let's sit down, let's have a talk. If you're bringing your kids, let's put them in the child minding room, pre-COVID, of course, but hopefully we'll get back to that. If you need a meal, we're serving meals at this time. Let's have a chat, like what's going on, and let's take steps from there, right? And that's kind of how we work is let's reduce as many barriers as we can so that you'll keep coming back and keep taking the steps you need to take in whatever you want to do. Sometimes that's work, sometimes it's other things, and that's okay. Like, it's just about folks kind of reaching their goals, whatever those goals may be. And so that's what I hope.
Well, and,
small thing.
I know. And just to let you know, Molly, we are all here for you. So feel free, we'll use what contacts we have. You've met the guys from the Hive. Jack is a wealth of knowledge. So, anytime, and I'm here too. We're all here to help. And that's sort of the common denominator, I think, tonight from this discussion. Jobs are out there, but it takes more than just, like you said, just one person. It takes all of us. So I want to thank all of you so much for joining in tonight. Everybody has brought so much to the conversation table. Thank you, Andrew, Corey, Molly, and Jack. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you out there for joining us on Healing Hearts, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.